The topic that we'll be discussing in this video is going to be about the Emmanuel prophecy. And this is actually one of the many examples where the New Testament claims that a prophecy in the Old Testament is being fulfilled. But as you're going to see today, when you go into the Old Testament and look at that prophecy, you'll see that it actually has nothing to do with what was being said in the New Testament. And to get a fuller understanding of all this, you might want to listen to this lesson more than once because I'm going to be going through a lot of information. So let's start off in Matthew chapter 1, verse 21. Matthew chapter 1 and verse 21. It says, "And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which being interpreted is God with us. So here you see that the New Testament is clearly claiming that Jesus fulfills a prophecy in the Old Testament. And it says that he is Emmanuel. Now, a problem that some people may have is that they'll read this and just take it as it is and not look at the prophecy in the Old Testament. So what we're going to do now is actually go to Isaiah 7 and verse 14 to take a look at this prophecy. Isaiah 7 verse 14. It says, "Therefore the Master himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." So here we see the prophecy of Emmanuel. But another problem that people may have when reading this is they may look at the New Testament and they may go back into Isaiah 7 verse 14 to look at this prophecy, but they don't look at the context surrounding the prophecy. And if you don't do that, you could end up taking this verse and making it say something it's not. So it's important for us to look at the context of Isaiah 7 to get a full understanding of the prophecy. So let's do that. Let's start at verse 1. It says, "And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz the son of Jotham the son of Uzziah king of Judah, that Rezin the king of Syria and Pekah the son of Remaliah king of Israel went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it." So here we see that Ahaz is the king of Judah at this time. So just by knowing that, we know that Ahaz, he's the 12th king of Judah, and he reigned from 732 to 716 BC. So that gives you a time period. And also, we need to remember these two kings that are coming up because they're going to have some significance later on in this prophecy. So we have Rezin, who is the king of Syria at this time, and also Pekah, who is the king of Israel at this time. So this is the time period also after the split between Israel and Judah. So now they are two separate nations, Israel and Judah. And keep in mind that Israel, that means Ephraim, because you're going to see Ephraim later on. That just means Israel. They're the same thing. So we can see that Rezin and Pekah, they're actually going to war against Ahaz, but it says they cannot prevail against him. Verse 2, "And it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind." So we know that the house of David is Judah, right? But you can see that his when it says his heart and the heart of his people were moved, that's saying that Ahaz and Judah, that they were basically fearful of Syria and Ephraim joined together to fight against them. So this is the reason why this sign is going to come, and you'll see why in a little bit. Verse 3, "Then said Yahuwah unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Jashub thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. And say unto him, Take heed and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and of the son of Remaliah." So you can see here that the Most High wants Isaiah to tell Ahaz that he and Judah should not be afraid of these two kings that are coming up against them. So let's keep reading. Verse 5. Because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabiel. So Pekah and Rezin's plan was to remove Ahaz from being the king of Judah and replace him with the son of Tabiel. The reason for all this is because at this time the Assyrians are coming to power, and Pekah and Rezin, they want Ahaz to fight with them against the Assyrians. But since Ahaz didn't want to do that, they're like, okay, we'll replace you with somebody else and he'll fight with us. So this is their plan. Let's see what the Most High says about that. Verse 7. Thus saith the Master Elohim, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. So he's telling them that this is not going to happen. So this is why they should not be afraid, because the Most High is not going to allow these two kings to do what they want to do. Verse 8. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. Now, it says within 65 years, Israel's gonna be broken, that it be not a people. You have to keep in mind that during this time period, the Assyrians are going to come and remove Israel, which is the northern kingdom, and they're going to remove them from their land and bring them into the Assyrian captivity. Okay, so that's just further letting you know that this whole chapter is around the time when the Assyrians were in power. And when we actually contrast that with what was in the New Testament, because right now this is when the Assyrians are coming to power, because the Israelites, they went through a lot of captivities. Just starting from this one, the Assyrian captivity, then they went to the Babylonian captivity, and then they went to the Medo-Persian captivity, and then the Greek. And when you go into the New Testament, you can see that that was set in the Roman captivity. So these are very different time periods from the Assyrian to the Roman captivity, as you can tell. Verse 9. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. So if Ahaz does not believe that the Most High is going to deliver him from these two kings, it's not going to go well for him in the end. Let's look at verse 10. Moreover, Yahuwah spake again unto Ahaz, saying, Ask thee a sign of Yahuwah thy Elohim. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, why is Yahuwah trying to give Ahaz a sign? Well, this sign is to show that the Most High is actually going to keep his word and deliver Ahaz and Judah from these two kings. Because remember, he told them not to be afraid. Their plans for what they want to do to you is not going to come to pass. Let's keep reading. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt Yahuwah. And it's really interesting that Ahaz actually says this, because he is actually a wicked king. So he's trying to act like he's trying to keep the law right here by not trying to test the Most High. But really, he was a wicked king, and he should have accepted this sign, or just asked for a sign when the Most High told him to. Verse 13, and he said, Hear ye now, house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will ye weary my Elohim also? Therefore, the Master himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So, another question we need to ask ourselves is, who is the you that this is talking about? Well, we can see that the Most High was using Isaiah to speak to Ahaz and also Judah. So this sign would have to be for them at this time period. And remember, this was a sign to let them know that Pekah and Rezin were not going to come up against them and destroy them, because the Most High was going to deliver them. So if we know that, then that tells us that this was a prophecy that had to have been fulfilled at this time. So it cannot be fulfilled hundreds of years later. It doesn't make sense for it to be a future prophecy, or that this sign came 1,000 years later in the New Testament. So we know that the U, again, this is talking about Ahaz and Judah. And keep in mind also that that U is not saying anything about Joseph or Mary. It's not saying that it's going to give Joseph and Mary a sign. So now let's keep reading. We're going to get a description of this child, and it's also going to further show that this was a prophecy and this was a child who came during Ahaz's time. Verse 15 says, "Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good." And we'll see why later on. We'll see why he's actually eating butter and honey. Verse 16, "For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings." So this is giving you a time period when this child is going to be born, because people are still young before they know, people are still young when they get to that level of knowledge where they can decipher between good and evils. So this is telling you that when the child is still young, these two kings that Ahaz and Judah abhors, they're going to be destroyed. So who are these two kings that Ahaz and Judah abhors at this time? Well, it would have to be Pekah and Rezin. So this child has to be born during the time of Pekah and Rezin. So it's all fitting like a glove. And notice how when we look at the New Testament, it's not mentioning any of this context around the prophecy about Pekah and Rezin. You won't find that in there. Okay, because basically what that's doing is taking it out of context. The New Testament is taking this prophecy out of context, because this child has to fulfill the prophecies and the things that are in verse 15 and verse 16 about eating butter and honey and still being young while these two kings were destroyed. Let's look at verse 17. "Yahuwah shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, even the king of Assyria. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahuwah shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. And they shall come and shall rest all of them in the desolate valleys and in the holes of the rocks, and upon all thorns and upon all bushes. In the same day shall the master shave with a razor that is hired, namely by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall also consume the beard." So we can see that in these verses, the Assyrians are in control of things. They are in power, and they are destroying Judah, because Yahuwah said that he was going to bring the Assyrians, the king of Assyria, upon Ahaz and Judah, because he says, "Bring upon thee and upon thy people." Okay, so we can see that again, this is set in a time period when the Assyrians are in power. So this child would be born during this time period, not about 1,000 years later. Let's look at verse 21. It says, "And it shall come to pass in that day that a man shall nurse a young cow and 2 sheep. And it shall come to pass for the abundance of milk that they shall give, he shall eat butter. For butter and honey shall everyone eat that is left in the land." This is also very key to this prophecy, because remember in verse 15 when it said that this child was going to be eating butter and honey? Well, when we look at verse 21 and 22, it's saying that everyone that is left in the land is going to be eating butter and honey. So when we look at this, we can see that the Assyrians are coming to power. They're going to eventually come into the land they come into the land of Israel and also Judah, and they have their way with it when you look at history. So it's saying that everyone that is left in the land is going to be eating butter and honey. and there's going to be abundance of milk. So there's going to be an abundance of food in the land because you have less people. So there's going to be more food for each person. So this is still letting you know that this child was going to be eating butter and honey during the time when the Assyrians are in control of things and they are ruling over Israel and Judah. This is not a child that was born hundreds of years later. So now we can see that the time period of this prophecy, it all fits, and it's in the time when Ahaz was king over Judah. But remember in verse 16 when it talks about these two kings being taken out. Let's take a look at history to see if that actually happened. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 15 and verse 27. 2 Kings chapter 15 and verse 27. It says, "In the 52nd year of Azariah king of Judah, Pekah the son of Remaliah began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 20 years. Let's skip down to verse 29. "In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Abel Beth Maacah and Genoa and Kedesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee and all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria." So we see here the king of Assyria, he's taking Israelites captive. Verse 30. "And Hoshea the son of Elah made a conspiracy against Pekah the son of Remaliah, and smote him and slew him, and reigned in his stead in the 20th year of Jotham the son of Uzziah." So right here, one of the kings that was going up against Ahaz is now destroyed, is now killed. So let's see if the other king was killed. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 16 and verse 1. "In the 17th year of Pekah the son of Remaliah, Ahaz the son of Jotham king of Judah began to reign. 20 years old was Ahaz when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and did not that which was right in the sight of Yahuwah his Elohim like David his father, but he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, and made his son to pass through the fire according to the abominations of the heathen, whom Yahuwah cast out from before the children of Israel. And he sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places and on the hills, and under every green tree." So like I said before, Ahaz was a wicked king. Verse 5. "Then Rezin king of Syria and Pekah the son of Remaliah king of Israel came up to Jerusalem to war, and they besieged Ahaz but could not overcome him." So just like what we read in Isaiah 7, these two kings came up against Ahaz, but they couldn't overcome him. The history is lining up. Verse 6. "At that time, Rezin king of Syria recovered Elath to Syria, and drave the Jews from Elath, and the Syrians came to Elath and dwelt there unto this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria, and out of the hand of the king of Israel, which rise up against me. So Ahaz is actually going to the king of Assyria to get help, instead of getting help from the Most High. He's even calling himself the king of Assyrians. He's even calling himself the servant and son of the king of Assyria. So he is submitting to them now, and that's going to hurt him in the end. Because remember, the Most High said if Ahaz does not believe, he will not be established. Verse 8. And Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of Yahuwah and in the treasures of the king's house, and sent it for a present to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria hearkened unto him, for the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and took it, and carried the people of it captive to Kir, and slew Rezin. So we have the other king that was trying to go up against Ahaz. He was also destroyed. So this whole prophecy of these two kings being taken out during Ahaz's time, it actually did happen. Okay, so all that was fulfilled during this time period. So let's take a look back at Isaiah chapter 7 real quick. Let's take a look at Isaiah chapter 7, and you're going to see something. So since these two kings were actually destroyed during Ahaz's time, that would mean that the child would have to be alive at this time period. So how is this child going to be born hundreds of years later? It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't line up with history. So now let's take a look at 2 Chronicles chapter 28. We're going to go to verse 16. 2 Chronicles 28 verse 16. It says, "At that time did King Ahaz send unto the kings of Assyria to help him. For again the Edomites had come and smitten Judah and carried away captives. The Philistines also had invaded the cities of the low country and of the south of Judah, and had taken Beth Shemesh and Ajalon and Gederoth and Shoko with the villages thereof, and Timnah with the villages thereof, Gizmo also and the villages thereof, and they dwelt there. For Yahuwah brought Judah low because of Ahaz king of Israel, for he made Judah naked and transgressed sore against Yahuwah." So again, Ahaz was a wicked king, and because of this, Judah was being destroyed by other nations. 20. "And Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria came unto him and distressed him, but strengthened him not. For Ahaz took away a portion out of the house of Yahuwah and out of the house of the king and of the princes, and gave it unto the king of Assyria, but he helped him not." So Ahaz is still giving presents to this king of Assyria, but notice how it says that the Assyrians distressed him and did not strengthen him and did not help him at this time. So just like the Most High said, since he didn't believe the Most High and wasn't trying to go to the Most High for help, and he actually went to the Assyrians for help, in the end it did not go well for him, because he was being distressed by the Assyrians, like it also said in the prophecy of Isaiah 7, because it talked about the Most High bringing the king of Assyria upon Ahaz and Judah, and this is actually what happened in history. So as we can see, there is actually clear deception that's being taken place in these so-called fulfilled prophecies in the New Testament. And really, we can see that that is basically a contradiction, because you have a certain time period when this child has to be born, but the New Testament makes it to where that child is born hundreds of years later, or about 1,000 years later, after the time when he actually should be born. And I have various videos where I show New Testament contradictions, and I have that in a playlist. And what we need to do is really take these things very seriously, and don't be fooled by people who tell you to ignore these things, because this is important for all of us, because we want to try to serve the Most High in the way he wants us to. So just, going over what we talked about, we know that this was a time when Israel was separated from Judah, and it was a little bit before the northern kingdom, which was Israel, was carried away captives by the Assyrians. And also we know that Pekah and Rezin, they were ruling. And again, we don't see any of this stuff in the New Testament. We can see that it's just taking Isaiah 7 verse 14, and it's taking that one verse and it's taking it out of context. And when we look at the sign, we see that it is to Ahaz and Judah at that time to let them know that Pekah and Rezin were not going to be able to fully destroy them and set up a new king in place of Ahaz. It does not say that this is going to be a sign for Joseph or Mary. So this again was in the time when the Assyrians were ruling, or they were about to take over Israel. And in the New Testament, that was during the Roman captivity. So you can see the contrast between the two. So after looking at all this information, it should be clear that Isaiah 7 verse 14 is not talking and can't be talking about Jesus. So this is another reason why we should be testing everything that is in the New Testament with the Old Testament to see if it's the truth. Shalom.